Hello there, and thank you for watching. I am going to do a watercolor pencil painting here of this peony, and I got the reference photo from Pixabay. The link will be in the description below, as well as the paper and all the supplies that I've used. This is a Strathmore cold pressed watercolor paper. You can see I sketched in using graphite pencil. And the pencils that I'm using are Faber Castell, Albrecht Duer watercolor pencils, and Caran Aquarelle. So I'm using both of those, they're watercolored pencils. And I think at the end I used maybe one white oil-based colored pencil. So just to get a pop of white. But I actually used gouache at the end as well for my highlight. So you can see that if you hang out till the end. There's some great tips there for how to use gouache and colored pencils, watercolored colored pencils coming up. So you can see I did the sketch, a loose sketch of the peony. And now what I'm doing, I did some color swatches to choose my colors, which I did first. I got the colors down that I wanted to use, and not too many. Yellows, violets, some reds, and greens. I think I used 3 greens. And this is a watercolor brush that I'm doing after I put the yellow down, which is the base coat. I'm just water is in this brush. These are usually used for travel. So I thought, oh, I like the point on it. I like the tip. So I wanted to use it just to get those fine edges. But I stopped using it because you have to kind of squeeze to get the water out. And my hands tend to be a little sore, a little arthritic, so I wasn't in the mood to squeeze. I just ended up going to my brush, my watercolor brushes and water, the old-fashioned way, I guess. While the yellow there is drying, I am doing the pink. I think it's actually fuchsia. This is an Albrecht Duer watercolor pencil. And you can see that I am getting the edges in of the flower of the petals. And I don't want to, I'm careful not to get my pink over the yellow because I don't want to create a green or anything. So I'm really pretty careful with that. And although at these beginning stages, it's okay if it mix in a little bit, but I don't want a green petal. So I'm very careful here, but I did want the glow. If you see in the reference photo, there's a very pretty glow, yellow underglow that I wanted to make sure I captured. So I wanted that yellow as the base coat. Now this is the Museum Aquarelle white, which I'm putting down for a base coat. So when I mix with the water, this creamy white, it's almost like a gouache, will blend in beautifully with this fuchsia. So I'll have a really nice pinky base coat here when I do hit it with water. Probably the best tip I can give you when you're using watercolor pencils is to get a good sharpener or use a good sharpener, pencil sharpener with them. They tend to break easily, which is pretty frustrating. But if you have a good pencil sharpener and don't over sharpen them, so one of my favorite pencil sharpeners are the Derwent. It's the Derwent crank sharpener, and I have a lot of control with that one. I don't think I would recommend using an electric pencil sharpener with this because it's a little too risky. But when you when you can control the turn of the sharpener, you can kind of feel the pencil, and you don't want to sharpen it till it a super fine point. To me, at least for the Faber Castell ones, the 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 Dural, I'm sorry, I just botched that. Um, it seems like they don't like to be sharpened to a super fine point. And so you can see the one I'm using here is I didn't really sharpen that because I'm really just getting some layer, like I'm even using this side there. I'm just getting down pigment, so I don't really need it to be super sharp. So I didn't even want to bother with sharpening it. Um, so here I am just getting the edges of the flower in. And again, I'm going to be real careful not to create green. I am going to go over and blend a little bit in the yellow there with my pink, but I'll be careful and not to get a green petal. And also what helps with not breakage. Now you can see actually with the, because I did that white underneath, you can see the petal in the upper right, the one I just finished, how creamy it looks because there was that white Museum Aquarelle pencil underneath, which is really creamy and thick. It's almost like gouache, which gouache is an opaque watercolor. So I had that underneath, and that's what kind of gave it a thicker appearance. So I'm doing it again. I really liked how that petal turned out, so I'm doing it again, and I'm putting white underneath everything that I'm doing now. And that area dried a little bit before I put down the gouache. And yes, I am getting over a little bit of a head cold, so if I sound stuffy, my voice sounds different, it's just I am fighting a little bit head cold, allergy season, who knows what it is, but it's on its way out, so yay. Watercolor pencils are a great alternative if you don't want to use odorless mineral spirits with your oil based colored pencils or wax based colored pencils. And understandable, they just because they're odorless does not mean that they are not harmful. You don't want to be breathing them in. You always want to read the labels and follow the directions on the labels with odorless mineral spirits. So the watercolor pencils are a great alternative to that. So, if you just get a handful, maybe of the Caran the ones here, the Aquarelle, because they are thicker, so they would be good for base layers. And also that white one, I think, is a must for your toolkit, for your art supply toolkit, because you can use that over regular colored pencils. They blend beautifully. They work well together and blend beautifully. The white Aquarelle watercolor pencil works very well with regular colored pencils, which are oil or wax based. So anyway, you can see here how I did the base of that pencil, and then it's mixing in with that pink fuchsia. I'm just adding a little water. I changed brushes, and I have a nice pinky, thick, kind of a cloud looking base there for my petals. So they complement each other very well. So I recommend them highly if you don't want to use odorless mineral spirits. There's almost no difference, I would think. When I've used both of them, I really can't tell the difference, especially with the Caran ones, because they're a little thicker, so they're a little heavier. So your base coats are a little heavier, and but the Faber Castell ones, they are, once you add water to them, it's a thinner layer. So you would need to add more layers, similar to, say, an oil color pencil and odorless mineral spirits. You probably would need two layers to get a good depth or value of your colors. and to kind of cover the, you know, the the paper. And this is cold pressed too. So this is not super smooth paper. This has a lot of hills and valleys in it, as you can see right there. For to smooth out those bumps there in the watercolor paper, it's going to need a lot of layers. So here I go, and I do a lot of layers of green on the petals and the leaves and the stem, because the leaves are so dark, and I actually wanted that deep contrast of really dark kind of foresty color green with a little lime green in some of the leaves, with the pretty fuchsia bright yellow of the peony of the bud. So I really was going for some deep value. So that means I have to do a lot of layers, and it's cold pressed, which means it's absorbed. It's like a thicker cotton paper, so it absorbs a lot of pigment. So that means a lot more layers. So I'm letting all that area dry, the petal and the leaf, and now I'm going on to the big leaf over here and getting the base colors for the big leaf. And you can see my pencil there. It's not very sharp. I'm not really worried about sharpened pencils now. You'll see towards the end when I do fine detail, the edges of the petals, that sort of thing. That's when I really kind of get into sharpening the pencils. But I'm not really worried about it now, again, because I get frustrated when they break, and I don't want to be frustrated. So I just kind of do a few cranks on the pencil sharpener, and that's it. And I'm not worried about it. So you can see I'm just getting some base coats down here. I will get a little music going here for you and come back when start getting into the other layers. Okay, so this is one of my favorite parts, where I add this kind of strawberry red to the green, and it creates this really pretty rusty color. Um, So now it's okay to blend colors. I know I'm on cold medication, so it's a good thing this is not a test. But if you guys want to comment below and point out my inconsistencies, go right ahead. We can have some fun with it. But I just wanted to get this YouTube video up about watercolor pencils because I think it's a really great alternative to OMS, odorless mineral spirit. So it was my goal to get it done. Anyway, so you can see now that color is blending into the green, and when it dries, it makes this really cool rustic color. I think I said that already. And I'm letting it dry. And then I'm going down here to do the base layers of this green, this forest green. Again, the colors that I used will be in the description below, but honestly, any colors, I mean, you could, if you wanted to make an orange petal, like I was trying not to make an orange petal earlier, but I was calling it green. If you want to make an orange petal, make an orange petal, who cares? It's a peony. There's orange peonies. So it really doesn't matter. It's really all about your values. And that's really anything to make it look realistic. It's about values. It's about making your darks dark enough and your lights light enough. And I know there's an artist, Lisa from Lockery Fine Art, and that's what she always says. And I think she even has t-shirts that say that, but it's just the truth, and that's just what happens. You got to make your darks dark enough and your lights light enough. Okay, so here I have a sharpened pencil, getting some fine edges here for the leaf. Kind of going over to these fine edges 2 or 3 times to get a nice dark color, to get the fold in the leaf, and to get some definition. So when I go in with my brush, I'm going to get the definition of the leaf, which you'll see here in a second. So just getting the pigment on the paper and getting the veins of the leaf right there and getting some different colors. Again, getting those wonderful values that we love so much, that we need so much. And there I go. I love if you've been noticing this little brush, I haven't talked about it. I actually really love it for detail and watercolor. I had trouble finding a nice brush for nice point detail work, but not too thin, not too thick, something I can move the pigment around. I really love this brush. I will put a link in that. Again, it's not sponsored. It's a Rose Brush, I think, is the name of the company. I will put it in the link below. And if I forget, please remind me in the comments. Now, my favorite area, this rusty part of the bud that I love to color in. I'm using a khaki color green now. I'm trying to get like a mustard color green, like a kind of again with the brick color. So I'm trying to get the mustard color, the brick color of the petal. I'm trying to get like a mustard color of a green. So I'm getting a khaki here, and I think I go over it with yellow, and then I just kind of blend everything all in. So now I'm getting basically what I'm doing is I'm getting my shadows in, and I'm getting the lines of the bud. And this area under here is very dark. It's a very, very dark stem in the reference photo. It's almost black. So I know I have a lot of layers coming ahead of me, and I really didn't want to just go in with black. I kind of wanted like a kind of a cool rusty green color. But the Faber Castell watercolors are pretty thin, so I had to use a lot of layers. And I think at the end I ended up using some of the Caran Dash. I didn't have a lot of the Caran Dash Aquarelle um, colors to make like a kind of the green that I wanted to, because they're a thicker watercolor pencil. So we'll see what I do at the end. Just a little tidbit there for you to hang on, and gotta watch till the end to see what I do to get that super dark value of the stem. And I didn't want the value of the stem to take away from the bud. I really wanted the focus to be on the bud. So I wanted the stem to be dark and the bud to be really bright. I wanted the stem to be in the shadow. So it was important for me to get it very dark. Here I am with almost a sharp pencil here, getting the outer layers. Now this is all dry up here. I was down working on the stem and the leaves. So now this is all dry, and I am going over and getting the edges of the petals. And I pretty much do that fuchsia color and the aquarelle white color like 6 times. I just basically go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth with some other pinks and fuchsias, but I'm pretty much just going back and forth to get the values that I like, so I can get the curve and the bend of the petals and the shadows. And so I really am just going back and forth and figuring it all out. Now just dabbing with a little water. And in the reference photo, if you'll notice that the way the sun is hitting this leaf, it's a lot brighter. The value it's like a fuchsia green. So I didn't want that to take away from the bud. I didn't want your eye to go right to this leaf. I wanted it to go to the bud and the rustic part of the bud that I love so much. So I changed the color of this leaf a little bit from the reference photo. So as artists, that's what we are supposed to do. So that's why we are artists, so we can change things around and create something that we think will be easy on the viewer's eye, or maybe easier on the viewer eye than the reference photo or a reference image. That's exactly why we paint and why we do what we do, right? We are creating something beautiful. So what I did was a undercolor, like a fuchsia undercolor green, and then I went over carefully and blended till I pretty much found the right value and shade that I was going for, that wouldn't be too dark but wasn't too bright, where it was taking away from the petals of the peony. So now here I am going some detail. That is the aquarelle, beautiful color aquarelle. Now you see how sharp those pencils get, and those pencils don't break. So, I know they are more expensive, but man, are they worth it. And again, I don't recommend getting a whole set. I think I said in the beginning of the video, just get a handful. And what I mean by that is get your primary colors, get your reds, your blues, your yellows, your white, some grays, black, maybe some fun colors like the fuchsia. But then that's really it, especially if you're just going to use them for base colors and use your color pencils over them. You really don't need a ton. And you only need, if you do, say, a lot of pet portraits, then you only need a handful of colors, because you're kind of going to do base, like you're going to have maybe 6 base colors for certain pet portraits, white dog, black dog, tan dog, cream color, you know what I mean? So anyway, I don't want to get lost into that. But you can see now I'm getting more into detail, and I'm using my aquarelle pencils, and those colors are just beautiful. So just get a handful of those for your toolkit, and trust me, I don't think you will regret it. So what I'm doing now is I'm letting that leaf there on the left dry, and I'm gonna pretty much finish up the petals because I want to balance the value between that leaf on the left and the petals in the middle. So I'm gonna get the petals pretty close to where I want them, and then I'm gonna finish up that leaf so it's not a distraction on the eye, so it's not like an eyesore. So I went over with a pretty strong yellow there, and I'm trying to create that beautiful color that the buds have, that I just admire so much and I think is so beautiful. At the base of a peony bud, there's always just that beautiful, beautiful rustic color. I think I probably said the word rustic like a dozen times, so I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself. I can probably blame everything on cold medicine right now, so I have a pretty good excuse. I wonder what I'm going to blame my next video, all my mistakes on my next video on. To think about that one. So this looks like it's an orange red, which is usually a scarlet red. I'm mixing my warm and my cools. I'm going to use the word rustic again to get that rustic effect. I'm kind of wanting to get like a brown, rich brick color. So I was playing around to see if the orange reds would work better, which is a warm red, or a blue red, which is a cool red. And I think the cool reds against the yellow is more of a contrast, so that's what I went with. So I just used that orange red just for a second, just to feel it out, but I kind of I like what it left. It left a little brownish look there, like a shadow. I apologize if you heard growling in the past voiceover there. That was Hannah. Somebody walked up to the door, so my little protector let me know somebody was here. And back to it. Now I added some khaki green, and you can see, I know I can see a difference just watching this, is the Caran Aquarelle. Those pigments, boy, are they strong. I mean, it really started to come together when I started to use those pencils and those pigments because they're so strong. So you can see what I meant by the Faber Castell. Their pencils, it's like a thinner watercolor. It's not as thick, so you can do a lot of layers. So maybe if that's what you want, and again, I'm on cold pressed paper, so it's going to absorb a lot of pigment. So if that's what you're looking for, a thinner watercolor, finer pigment, then that'd be perfect for you. If you want something thicker, more like a gouache, which is more opaque, a thicker color, then the Caran Aquarelle, those pencils, watercolor pencils, are perfect for you. So I think watching this, you can definitely see the difference of the two. So here I am doing this is an aquarelle, pointed, again, getting the details here and using my little brush, watercolor brush. And I did the white pencil underneath first. So I'm going to grab a little bit of that white on my brush and blend it together with this fuchsia when I'm ready here any minute. And all the petals behind it there, you can see I went over everything with a full layer of white because I knew I was going to go in kind of heavy with this fuchsia color. And I really liked this color from the Albrecht Duer, the Faber-Castell watercolor. So I did some kind of veiny lines there with that pink color. And now I'm blending that white. I'm blending kind of up to blend into that fuchsia. And just getting my edges, using my fine point, getting the edges for the petals. You can see here I'm using the brush, just dabbing a little bit of the color and using the color that's on the brush for some of the veins and the different shades, the different values in the petal. And even while it's still a little wet, you can still go over with your watercolor pencil if the paper is wet, so you can get kind of a different effect with that. You just kind of have to experiment a little bit. Now I'm just using the pencils like I am ordinary regular colored pencils. I will probably use a little water here, but not much. I may go over it with a little white to blend in, but now with this petal here, I'm pretty much wrapping it up, and I don't use water on the final layer. I just do the pencil and blend maybe with white or a lighter color over. Kind of depends on what I'm doing. So they're they're fine just to use alone. If you don't want to use your regular colored pencils, oil-based, wax-based color pencils on top of watercolor pencils, you totally don't have to. You can just, this painting is pretty entirely done with all watercolor pencils. I think at the end, I might have experimented with a little white, the Polychromos white over the gouache, just to get a highlight, but it didn't really make a difference. So, I mean, the majority, all of this is all done with just watercolor pencils. So, it's, you don't have to use water with them. You can use them with or without water. That's basically what I'm trying to say, and that's what it says on the box, and the directions of both of them can be used with or without water. They blend beautifully well together. If you want to use your white pencil to blend them together or another color to blend them, that's great. Or use a pencil blender, that's great. You can do that too. Yeah, so they're great to experiment with. I am perfectly happy with watercolor pencils with the Caran Dash ones. I kind of packed away my Faber Castell ones and didn't think I would ever visit them again. But now that I've discovered the Aquarelle Caran Dash, I'm back into them again. So I thought I would do this video on the differences between the two and to help you out, and so you could see what I have learned with the pencils. See what I personally like and don't like. And if you have better luck sharpening them, please let me know. Please let me know your secrets and all of that. I do have the sanding, the sharpener, the sanding pencil sharpener that I use for my regular color pencils. I definitely use those to get a fine point if you don't want to use the actual sharpener, the crank sharpener. So here I got, I added grain here. I'm trying to get a little muddy actually. I want to get, the base color there of the peonies, the shadows, and those beautiful rustic colors. There's the word again, rustic. The beautiful rustic colors of the base of the peony. So that's what I'm going for. My favorite part. Okay, I don't know if you watched all that, but that was pretty much a hot mess there. I got so much pigment on the paper. I did the white aquarelle pencil, the pink, the fuchsia from the Faber Castell, Albrecht Duer, and the magenta, and I'm just getting my lines there of the petals. So, and now I'm taking the water and just blending it all in and creating my edges, creating my petals, creating my values. So I'm letting all that dry and I'm going back down to my stem. Remember the stem? Remember the stem that's practically black? And I'm like, I need it to get dark, dark, dark. So here I go. More layers on the stem. I end up using a really, really dark blue, purples, and reds. There it is. Just mixing in, getting like a blue green, like a forest green, and just getting dark, dark as I can, and doing lots of layers, but trying to create the definition there of the base of the bud. So I wanted the base of the bud to be a little lighter than underneath the stem, because the shadow of the bud would be on the stem, right? There would be no light underneath the bud on the stem. So that's got to be darker than the bud. The base of the bud will have a little more light hitting it. So that was the dilemma. So right now it's backwards. So I've got to get that base darker so it looks a little bit more realistic. So here's a pro tip for you. The great thing about watercolors is that you can lift the color from the paper. As you saw right there, what I was doing on the left of the stem, I wanted it lighter because that's where my light source is coming from. So I wanted that lighter. So I lifted up some color with my brush, with my wet brush. I just wet the brush, get it clean, a damp brush. I go over the edge or go over the part that I want lifted, and it picks up the pigment off of the paper. So that's another great thing about using watercolor pencils versus OMS is you have a little more flexibility in that sense, and you can pick up pigment a lot easier. Okay, here we go. Got a sharp pencil now and getting in some fine detail using my earth green, it looks like, pencil, and getting the leaves at the base. These are going to be the final layers. I am going to use a little water over these just to mix a touch because I don't want to stir up too much of what's underneath. So my brush isn't that wet. It's just a little wet, just kind of damp, just because I don't want to disturb the color, the light color underneath. I want that to come through. and just kind of playing around, trying to get that cool rustic color there. And again, now I took some tissue and blotted that because it got too dark. It was getting too muddy. And again, my light source is coming from the left side. So I'm trying to keep that area right there. I think when that dries, I'll go over it with a little bit of yellow to keep that area right there pretty bright, like the light is bouncing off of it. Okay, so stay tuned here. I'm going to be doing gouache and the final layers over that with regular oil and wax-based colored pencils. So these are watercolor still. I am doing some red here, getting my shadows in. I'm going to add a touch of water just to blend this and get that red to pop a little bit. You'll see my brush is not very wet at all, just slightly damp. I just want to bring that pigment out and get a little pop in that pigment. And so now here we go with the gouache. I'm going to mix up the gouache. It's Winsor Newton titanium white gouache. I get a little plastic cup, get some water. You want a nice thin consistency, but not too thin to where it's just going to absorb into the paper. So it's good to practice a little bit. If you're not familiar with gouache, definitely play around with it because it really can absorb into the paper. And I'm using cold pressed paper. So again, that's more absorbent. So I'm tapping it with my finger afterwards because I don't want it too thick. If it's too thick, then it will crack when it's dry. So I'm making sure I don't want it too thick. What I'm doing is basically just creating another base layer to put the oil and the wax-based pencils over it. So I lost the white of my paper and I'm going in with some gouache just for some nice bright highlights that I'm going to blend in. When the gouache dries, I'm going to blend in with my regular pencils, oil and wax base, like my Polychromos. That was my Polychromos I'm using to get my edges. I'm using my fuchsia, getting the edges of the pencil, and using the Derwent to blend that. And that's Caran Dash, kind of using a little bit of everything in my toolbox. I just love that Caran Dash color, that purpley color there. And Polychromos, of course, has some wonderful pinks. So using those. So now it's just blending and getting the values so I can get kind of the 3D and get the shadows, get the 3D effect of the petals. So this is kind of the fun part where you're in the final layers and it's all coming together. And I'm trying to, this was a little difficult part here. You'll see me go back and forth with this little area. I'm trying to create a fold in the petal, and I was definitely having some issues with it because the way the petal was in the reference photo and the light was bouncing off of it, it was very tricky to see and to capture and to bring across on the drawing. So I kind of edited it myself and did what I thought looked best, what was happening with my drawing. So it's not perfect with what the reference photo is, but that's okay. That's kind of, again, what it's about. We are not here to create exact matches of photos, of photographs. We are here to create our own perception of the photographs and the images that we see and create our own art. So you can see here where I'm trying to make this one petal is kind of has like a little flyaway part to it, and I'm trying to get that to come across with my values and get everything a little darker and lighter and trying to create a shadow right there. So we'll see what happens in the end. I think it looks okay, but I definitely fudged around with it for a while, probably a little too long, as we usually do, get stuck in one area. But you can see how the gouache there in the white really dried nicely and looks pretty nice as far as getting a nice reflection and highlight for the petal. Getting some more darks in there. And now I'm just pushing around oil and wax and figuring out which pencil. I'm kind of going by the seat of my pants here. I didn't really do too many pencil swatches when I started this. I kind of just said, oh, I just need this pink and probably this fuchsia, and then I got into doing the shadow and figured out, okay, what am I doing here? Now you can see I switched over to a more warmer red. Again, I want to grab that rusty color and kind of get a little darker shadows in there. It was getting a little pinky, so I went with the opposite with a warm color because it's looking a little pinky. I want to cut back the pink, so I'm going to go with a warm orange color, and that will cut it back very quickly, very fast. Okay, so here I got kind of a little buildup of oil and wax, so I'm just using a little bit of the OMS to break it up a little bit and blend it together. Again, this is cold pressed paper, so this takes a lot of layers and it's really absorbing into the paper. So that's one reason why I'm constantly going back and back. It's just like, you know, absorbing, and changing every time I look at it. The color is changing, so once it dries and once it settles. So it's this might be better for on hot pressed watercolor paper, but I wanted to try watercolor on this Strathmore paper on cold pressed. I've never used it before, so this was just kind of more of an experiment. And now I'm just getting some more detail here with my Polychromos, my sharpened pencils, and just having a little fun with it. So almost done here. And I think we go back to the stem and get that stem super dark, and then it will be finished. So thank you for hanging in there and watching this with me, my fellow artist. Now here's a good example of using the watercolor pencils over the oil and wax pencil. It's totally okay to do. And you can see the vibrancy of this one pencil, this one yellow. I will have the name of that in the description below, but that really is beautiful and gives it just a nice sun-kissed pop there. And so that's a great way to mix, great example of how your watercolor pencils mix perfectly fine with your oil and wax-based pencils. So there's no problem with doing that at all. Okay, so you can see I was using a oil-based pencil there. Here I go with the stem to get it really dark. And this is from Holbein. It's a Melts pen, and I'm really, really enjoying it. It's for oil-based color pencils, and it's in lieu of odorless mineral spirits, so you don't have to do odorless mineral spirits. And I was just testing this out. This was given to me by Holbein, by a Holbein rep. So it's not sponsored, really. I mean, I'm not getting anything out of it, but I just was trying it. And so you know how I was saying I wanted the stem really dark. Well, I'm going in with my Derwent drawing pencils. That was Moon Glow, which is a beautiful, beautiful color, and which is like a purpley blue color. And I'm trying to get kind of a fun blue, green, dark, mysterious color here on the base of the stem, or on the stem. So that so I'm letting that dry right there where I use that Holbein pen, and I'm going back over to the leaf, and I'm really just experimenting. You can see I did like a little watercolor pencil, and now I'm just going with the Derwent with the Derwent Lightfast, which is oil based. So I'm experimenting, and this is what you have to do when you have new products and you want to try them out. You just kind of play around and see what happens. So going over again with gouache, this petal is the thorn in my side. Even though these peonies don't have thorns, it's feeling like a thorn right now. Trying to get this one petal look realistic and do what I want it to do. But we'll see what happens. I think I finally give up somewhere down the road here, but I'm going to fast forward even more so I don't torture you with watching me suffer through trying to get this last petal where I want it. So I'm letting that gouache dry, going over with a little more red. Again, this is cold pressed paper. It can take a gazillion layers. So while I'm waiting for it to dry, I'm just thinking, oh, I'll do another layer and we'll see what happens. And here is what happened. So we got through it. Fellow artists, if you made it this far watching my video, thank you so much. I so appreciate it. Please comment below and let me know what other videos you would like to see, how you liked this video, and if you tried watercolor pencils, let me know your thoughts and any of your tips and tricks. I would love to hear them, and so would other artists too. Don't forget to subscribe and find me on Facebook at Molly's Fine Art. Thank you, artists.